Okay, happy Wednesday, everyone. We are going to get started here, and this session will be recorded. Bill, do you have some slides to share with us today?
Yes. Let me
Okay, great.
see.
So hello and welcome to Sterling and VMware's Power Block session. I am Megan Moore, Sterling's Director of Strategic Programs. We know your time is very valuable, so thank you for choosing to spend a portion of your day with Sterling and VMware. Before we dive into the demo, I wanted to give you a brief overview of Sterling's capabilities. Thank you. Okay, great. So if you can go back to the previous slide, please.
Sorry about that.
No problem. There we go. So Sterling is a principal VMware partner and a preferred services partner authorized to sell and service VMware solutions to customers across the nation. We have 50 plus technical staff and 75 plus sales staff, all trained on VMware solutions and offerings. We are sure to provide you with industry best value on all of your client to cloud IT needs. As you can see from this slide, we hold many VMware competencies, including 2 master services competencies with more coming soon. Next slide, please. Sterling offers complete customized solutions from client to cloud. We serve on multiple federal, state, and local government contracts, and we support all industry verticals. Security is very important here at Sterling. We have a robust, secure supply chain, including OTIPs and CMMC certifications. For any questions about Sterling, please use the email aliases you'll find at the end of the demo. And for questions during the demo, please put them in your Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll make sure to address them at the end. Now I will turn it over to Solution Engineer Bill Diamond to talk to us about new threat landscape with Carbon Black.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning, everybody. Dan, did you want to say hello and introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Quigley. I'm the Federal Account Executive here supporting Bill across the Army and Defense agencies here at VMware Carbon Black. And thank you for your time today. We look forward to the webinar.
Thanks, Dan. We'll just jump right in. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom. I'm going to ask that Dan monitor these, and we'll pop up with questions as we proceed. Today, we're going to take a little bit of a different path. Normally, we'll do intense threat hunting, and I think it's the thing that a lot of people see many times. But today, I wanted to use a little bit of my DevOps background to try and do a shift left in the way that we might approach some of the risk factors that we're seeing out in the world today, and how is it we can better analyze and defend against the ransomware, malware attacks, misconfiguration information, and things that can actually lead to a compromise even years down the road. First, we need to talk about what supply chain risks are. And this is anything that can disrupt the manufacture or delivery of goods and services. That's a supply chain risk. I think one of my favorite examples is this one, which is the Sony PlayStation 2, which was announced with huge fanfare in late summer of 2004. They had massive pre-orders, and they had multiple ships bringing these in from China, all in time for the big Christmas season. But before Thanksgiving, an oil tanker got stuck in the Suez Canal and blocked all these ships, which resulted in a 90% delivery drop to the stores, and 1,700 stores had no inventory whatsoever. Now, this could have been a catastrophe for a lot of companies and something we all pay attention to because of the potential bottom line impact of a supply chain compromise. But the PS2 did go on to sell 155 million units despite a kind of a rocky launch to this product. So while we can have supply chain disruptions, we can also recover from them. From the cybersecurity perspective, we look more at what are the specific attributes of a supply chain risk. So we talk about threats and vulnerabilities. And increasingly, we talk about the adversarial nature of threats, as well as the non adversarial, which can happen just from system outages, geopolitical issues, and even legal and regulatory landscape changes. For us, we focus in on the insertion of malware, counterfeit components inserted into software, industrial espionage, the stealing of our information, the supply disruption caused by bad software or compromises, as well as increasingly foreign intelligence operations against supply chain. We also have to look at the external vulnerabilities, which can be just the interdependencies in our supply chain that can result in an application or a system breakage. And we also have supply chain entity weaknesses where we may have bad certificates, bad credentials, exposed secrets. And this all leads into the inadequate cyber hygiene issue that we're going to discuss a little bit today. On the internal side, we have a lot of vulnerable information systems and components that we may not have recognized we possess. As always, we have a long-standing, ongoing issue with systems patch management and the changes as well as the questionable effectiveness of some of our security controls, which may be atavistic, things that we've inherited over many years. And that ongoing challenge we all know about education and information for cybersecurity, so to kind of reduce a lot of the threats that we may get from social engineering and from spam and phishing. These adversarial threats are part of what we look at today because of the methods and channels by which they're introduced into our code, into our applications. So we have an awful lot of open source, which is a wonderful thing. I love open source. I've been developing in it for the last 20, 25 years. But we're also seeing increasingly a lot of manipulated open repositories where it's possible for an adversary to insert code directly into our projects that are exposed. Then we also see the substitution of code, as we saw with SolarWinds, where a third party replaced code components with ones that contained a backdoor and allowed for attack against systems. We have seen this method in a variety of tools and tool sets that are used over the last couple of years. And then, of course, the backdoor issue, which we just recently saw with compromise of NetBeans as a backend. That non-adversarial side, we do look at natural disasters, quality issues, the geopolitical and the legal regulatory changes. Many of us are going through audit and compliance where we may be trying to step up our compliance, which can result in some confusion about how to approach managing our source code projects and protecting just the estate for our virtualization and our container projects. And of course, we have those supply chain interdependencies. This is one I focus a lot of attention on is these three issues, because we are seeing a dramatic increase in the amount of third-party code that is used from open source in commercial products. We also have these entity weaknesses where it could be bad certificates, bad publisher information, or unreliable information that has been embedded into these applications that we depend upon. Part of that is determining the country of origin authentication capability of any components that we inherit. This has especially been true with Python and with Ruby, which have had a tremendous number of components, modules, and build packages, which turned out to be of high risk with respect to cyber. And this relates then to our vulnerabilities. So each of these missteps in code or compilation result in highly vulnerable information systems. Uh, we then have to deal with the patches that apply to these, but it can also take us all the way back through the build process. So we wind up having much longer tail loops for managing the security of our systems. Sometimes as we're building products, we don't even know what the security controls are that we're going to apply. So we aren't really monitoring CWE or other types of information like OWASP controls or CIS or the DISA-STIG for the DoD community and how we build products so we can anticipate where there could be a non-compliance with relevant security controls. And honestly, for a lot of us who came out of the old world of development from the 70s and 80s, cyber wasn't an issue. All we cared about was maximizing our code efficiency. I'm one of those people who I was in a Fortran 4 class in the early 1980s, and an admiral was the teacher. She would walk around with a millimeter, actually, I think it was a nanosecond in her hand, which is 11.7 inches. That's the amount of distance electricity crosses. And her thing was that if you were wasting electricity, you were wasting time. So if your code was inefficient, you got to whack across the hand with a nanometer. One of the things that I need to really kind of bring up today, and it's kind of a painful subject for a lot of people, is the discussion about secrets. uh, Not classified information or anything like that, but this is what we use in our encrypted environments in order to pass variables back and forth during the build process or what we use in open source. And the problem with secrets is that many of us get in a hurry, or it's just a poor practice. We'll actually embed usernames, passwords, certificates, all these credentials, and even API keys directly into our code repositories. And this is part of the mechanism that uh, untrusted adversaries, other people are using to get information about how to exploit our applications. For the fun of it, I always confess my own sins. In my own GitHub repo, I decided to go ahead and use GitGuardian, which is a really nice tool. GitGuardian then walked through a bunch of my old repos for me, and it told me where I had a number of exposed secrets directly in the code of some of my older repos. Some of these repos, fortunately, they're all private, but you can see I had a fair number of open secret incidents in my code. That would have led to a compromise. And here I can see directly within a single repo the types and class of secrets that were exposed. So I can have things like GitLab tokens, RSA private keys, different API keys, all of which can be leveraged for attacks against systems which were using this code. In this case, I actually had a certificate directly exposed in. And as we all know, with private keys, that would easily allow for manipulation of a system if we knew that this was present and could be used. So that's the subject there about secrets management is how do we address this in our builds, in our implementation, in our lifecycle management? The challenge here has always been that we have hard-coded credentials in many code and application logics. It's common in shell scripts, it's common in Python, PowerShell. And in DevOps schools, we often will do this directly within the configuration files from which we're inheriting the information because we don't stop and use things like vaults or in-company secrets management capability. It can also be true in our CI/CD environments where it's just that lack of time and the amount of effort that it might take, depending on the tool chain that we're using, to actually effectively manage our secrets. So that can lead to an incomplete set of, visibility and oversight to our applications, but can also compromise access of third-party vendor accounts and also provide a backdoor for remote access into our applications. Now, the problem is severe, and I really can't understate this one. So we've got a fairly new report that came out from Cloudinary that found that there was 85% of the leaks occurred on the developer's personal repos. The reason this is that many of us will, uh, we work for companies, so we'll use a company's repo, we'll clone or fork a repo into our private accounts, and then we just do stuff. We're building code, and we don't really go back and clean up some of the things that we've done before we do a push of that code back into our employer's repo. That's why 15% of these leaks on GitHub occurred within the public repos that are owned by organizations. So analyzing for secrets is going to help us a lot in identifying potential backdoors, vulnerabilities, and that kind of that enlarged attack surface area that we have in our systems and applications, even during the dev phase of an application construction. We already know that the risk factors here are pretty high. We've seen a number of organizations that have had fines depending on the regulatory body. We've had some litigation. Of course, we have the real problem of social media, which can engage in reputation harm. And then these supply chain attacks can require a full review, and that can take a great deal of time, energy, resource, and cost out of your budget to address after the fact. So we're going to try and encourage you to attack this problem in the early stages. And we're trying to give you some ideas where this happens. So we see the path of these supply chain attacks is occurring throughout what's called the value chain, that entire set of relationships between developers, partners, third party, licensed software, commercial entities, everything. We have this with our outside partners where we have contracted third parties who have developed code that we are using in our applications. We have unauthorized access where we had ineffective security against our repos, which may have allowed for insertion of modules or modification to the modules or code set that we had. That leads into our source code control problem where we aren't necessarily analyzing our source code and we aren't really managing it with a high degree of security applied to it. Funny story about this is that we find that some of the third party or the different Git repos that are out there, some of the commercial ones actually do a much better job of security than standing up your own Git repo internally. We have a challenge with some CI/CD pipelines. These are wonderful tools. Uh, they take a bit more effort to configure for security during the build process in order to reduce the amount of exposure that we might have. Internal dev, guys like me who don't necessarily write the best code or even the fastest code, but because we are trying to do our tests in a hurry, we may leave information behind in a repo that we're pushing, and that can lead to compromise. We have these third-party modules, and a lot of these are nation-state issues where we're using Ruby, Python. We're inheriting modules that we've installed through pip or through Ruby gems, and these are from untrustworthy organizations or even from countries, as well as people who found it entertaining to create fairly malign content that then gets inherited into applications. We have our external provider modules, which themselves may become compromised, resulting in a chain set of compromise down the stream. We have our supplier access issue and DevOps again, which leads back into CI/CD pipelines. The infamous cloned repo, which is guys like me, and then the inherited code, stuff that we took from other people that wasn't necessarily tested for the potential of it containing a compromise. Now, for somebody like me, I started out on mainframes in the 70s, writing my code on MVS ESA, setting up on my tape libraries using JCL, and the SuperWilbur was my editor. But everything was a shared project, but it was closed. Only people that we granted access to had access to our code. We sort of carried that over into the world of Unix in the 80s, and we started using basic source code control with SVN. We had local file systems, some shared content, and we're using VI or Emacs for all of our code builds. And then with PCs, it wasn't even that different. My first commercial software development was done with a local code editor called Perfect Writer, which was anything but, local compilers in C, and everything was shared via floppies. Most of our work we had to share between each other. We had a private BBS we'd upload our code to. But today is very different than the world I started out in. And yes, I did start out with Key Punch, so I'll admit to that. Now everything is cloud. The cloud really is how we do everything. But we can have all these different cloud-based repositories, which are generally pretty awesome, and they save us a lot of time and effort. But without the right security applied to them, we can have compromises in our code. We also can very easily self-host our own solution, which is everything from GOGS to Bitbucket to GitLab on premise. And these can be incredibly easy to set up. You can even run them right instead of a Docker and make life really easy for yourself, but there could be a cost. Everybody these days is in DevOps because we want to have a lot of the benefits of the immutability of the code. These are things that we care about so that we're only applying changes that need to be made versus rolling through with a script that just changes everything. So obviously we're using Ansible, Salt, Stack, Chef, Puppet, PowerShell, DSC, tons of other tools that are out there. Even one I read yesterday about ZX from Google, which is sort of like Shell for DevOps. And then almost all of us have adopted automation engines, with Jenkins being probably the most popular one. But we also have a lot of other tools that allow us to combine our automation engines with our containers, with our DevOps and cloud tools to create a complete CI/CD environment for the development of code that's automatically built based on triggers. But what we're still missing is the unit testing. So unit testing allows us to go through our code and find down to the function subroutine level, even at the property level, where there could be challenges or issues. And this isn't base feature. That is, you don't get JUnits typically included with most of your CI to CD stack. So we have to build this or we have to buy it. And that does require the manual definition of these unit tests, which is a bit of a challenge because they're not the easiest thing in the world to create. For us, we look at the security testing. What we call in DevOps is shift left, which is to move our security testing to the development and testing pipeline way at the beginning. So with each triggered build, we're automatically doing a set of analysis against our code and against the resulting binaries. This allows us then to start doing things like variant analysis and to do our dependency analysis. And we've got, some real serious motion here from our cloud repo providers that are helping us analyze our dependencies so we can find structural weaknesses, potential exposures, or downstream risks that we had not anticipated. With container adoption, which is a very big subject here at VMware, we see an awful lot of adoption of both Docker from the development side and Kubernetes from the deployment side. We see almost everything being built now in these platforms. And there's so much interrelationship between these and virtualization. So what we're looking at is, can we analyze these containers during the dev process on a triggered build so that we can identify any potential weaknesses or threats? And part of where this threat landscape comes in is that what we know today is that more than 50% of all the images that you can pull down from Docker Hub, for example, has critical vulnerabilities. And many of these are patch issues, but 51% of these are critical vulnerabilities. So there's just no good news here. And with the Provasio report from December, what they found was that more than 6,000 images up on the Docker Hub had either malicious JavaScript, hacking tools, miners, or actual malware embedded in the image itself that many of us simply inherit because we'll just do that from whatever operating system and version that we like without any awareness of the level of risk that it may present. So part of the challenge now is we have to start over with repo hygiene. So part of the recommendations I'm going to push here, it may just be my personal opinion, you can disagree, is to take your repos private. The source code is a target, and sharing these repos to the public may not be your best approach. Source code exposes vectors when we don't understand or we don't know in advance any potential threats that are exposed in our source code. And because of the presence of secrets that we may have in our repos, this can create a minefield of opportunities for the bad people in the world to attack our systems and to create risks. We do have a challenge of the unauthorized access. We saw this with SolarWinds. I think we're starting to see this with some others where code insertion into repos and substitution of source code in third-party repos creates a direct and imminent risk to you and your organization. So we also have some problems with malicious conduct where employees have engaged in mischievous behavior that has resulted in overall systems failures. We are suggesting as well is to require multi-factor authentication. Switch, if it's a personal repo, consider switching it to an organization. Then you can require MFA across everything. This helps slow down the impersonation of your authorized users. In truth, it won't completely stop it because of the prevalence of shared keys. However, we can block the non-MFA users. So if somebody was an employee or was a member uh, with access to your repos, you can revoke them because their MFA no longer is authorized. Non-authorized employees should automatically instantly lose access to all of your repos. This is just a basic hygiene and security method. And I'm going to encourage you to start using secrets detection. There are products out there for your different cloud-based repos that can walk through your code, analyze, and identify where you may have embedded secrets within your source code or within the project binaries as well. We can do a bit better with our containers. Increasingly, I'm pushing an idea that we need to use more from scratch versus building from an existing image. It is a bit more work, but it will put you in control of all of your container builds, and you'll know exactly what you created from. I'll put together another webinar in the future that walks through the process of building a from scratch a repo using Red Hat or CentOS or Ubuntu as a code base so that we have better control over what we're doing. And then we'll integrate the vulnerability scans into these upon build. So during the dev cycle, we can automatically ensure that these containers and the images are scanned on a daily basis. And then we can integrate those scans into our CD/CD pipeline so that we're taking the scan results, creating that as an issue, for example, into that repo. So we have a clear understanding of any risks or issues that need to be addressed with respect to patch vulnerability and secrets. And then we need to do a better job of coming up with our consistent hardening policies. This is a kind of an emerging field. A number of companies are doing this, but the challenge has been how difficult is it and how consistent can we make it to define policies for our repos, for our images, for our containers that will automatically alert or block us on a violation, and also to create the webhook for the notifications. So, for example, if you use Slack, I use Slack quite a bit, then I automatically get a notification in a Slack channel that tells me whenever an issue has been found of non-compliance. And I'm working on those as well for my vulnerability scans of my containers, but I want to know whenever anything is found in any of my builds that could lead to potential compromise. So with our container actions, one of the things that we have done with Carbon Black Cloud is we've added on support for scanning Docker and Kubernetes images and containers, which allows us to do that whole shift left of security back to the development phase, which is pretty exciting to me. This allows me then to automate and include container scanning and image scanning during the dev cycle. So as soon as I finish through Jenkins, for example, the pipeline, I have a command set that simply does that image scan and pushes the results and pushes it back online. So through Carbon Black Cloud, I have complete visibility into the posture and vulnerabilities, all of my images, even before I've built any containers from them. So with my container action, I've got a simple pipeline example here. It's really simple to do. It really is one line in my pipeline to make this happen. And now I've got a result that tells me all the CVE IDs, the level of severity of the risk, and if there's a fix available. But importantly for us in this market, we need to know the CVSS score. CVSS tells us a lot more information about how exploitable is this vulnerability. Sure, we get that it could be medium or high, but I can have a medium vulnerability that has a high risk of exploitability. So where do I focus? I tend to focus on the most exploitable ones, address those first in my code, then work my way through uh, the least exploitable all the way down the stack. With our approach, we also then provide all the vulnerability scan information, all the CVE IDs presented by the image container and the workload. So whether it's virtualized, Docker, Kubernetes, whether it's the image or the actual running container, you'll have all this information inline for you. And it's done automatically, so you don't have to do scheduled scans of your containers. Within the information, part of what you do need is you need to know the CVE and CVSS scores. So this will help you then better prioritize what your build process and build cycle can be and should be. With hardening policies, we've seen an awful lot of excitement over this because a lot of our customers say, look, we need to at least start somewhere that we know is a good place to start. What we've done with Carbon Black Cloud for our workload security for containers is we have created a template based on CIS 1.6 that you can immediately apply and have that simply used to detect any violations of those policies. And this will tell you then across the board for your containers, what's the posture? So do we see where images haven't been scanned or where we have things like privilege escalation allowed? These are things then we can meaningfully go and address, and we can start blocking as a result of specific policy violations. We do have these pre-built templates for you, and we also like to create your own. So you can do JSON, or you can, for each of these, you can use audit or block. So almost anything can be turned into a policy, and many of these are now drop down. So we select them directly from within the container configuration. And it makes it very easy then to enable webhook notifications so that on detection, you're getting that message in your Slack channel or Microsoft Teams or wherever it is you want your webhook to go, which could be to generate a ticket in ServiceNow or another application. But this helps you prioritize and respond more quickly to potential security concerns in your containers and builds. So what's our next step? Well, push that one already, which is to tightly manage these repositories and to manage the secrets. So closing these repos, implementing multi-factor authentication is a good first step. Adding secrets detection should be something you can do today. If you're up on GitHub and you're using that, get GitGuardian and apply that to your repos and have that do a scan to tell you where you have any exposure of secrets in any of your source code repos. And this will also help you, even if it's Docker files or Jenkins files, it will also tell you about any embedded secrets there. And I will push using Scratch images, not the pre-built, off of any hub. Unless you have tested it and you've confirmed it, I would strongly urge you not to use it. With continuous vulnerability assessment, we can go ahead and put this directly into the Jenkins pipeline or whatever your CI tool is. So we can add the container security. We can automate the vulnerability scans of your containers and images. Or we can also give you a container security policy consistent with CIS 1.6 that's extendable and provides you pipeline integration so that we can start pushing updates to the images or create the issue that we want to attach to the GitHub repo whenever we do find a potentially compromising condition. With that consistent hardening, you can start with our pre-built template, and you can also use your own by using JSON, YAML, or what we just introduced, which are the container image rules, which is a drop-down box, which makes it very easy to get going quickly with container rules. And we can add webhook notifications for the real-time updates. So you're always informed, you're always aware, and you have everything being created as potential tickets in your systems or notifications in your different applications. So we can also automate a lot of these processes in a more effective way than what we've done. Any questions? Or I can just take you right into some of the work that I'm doing, if that's something that would be of interest. Dan, do we have anything in the channel?
Hey, Bill, I think we can go into the work you were talking about. No questions have populated so far.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So do you see my screen, Dan, or do I need to share that screen again?
Nope, you're good to go.
Okay. So here I'm in my local Jenkins instance. And I just started building this a couple of days ago, so I have not fleshed this out as well as I should. I do have this tied into GitHub and into my local Docker. So what I did here is I started out with a simple Docker build and test. And this is a very simple pipeline, and I do mean simple. So if I look at that workspace, all you'll see in here is I've got a basic Docker file and I have a big basic Jenkins file. And you can see my Docker file completely violates everything I just told you. So I'm doing the classic thing. I'm going to pull from Ubuntu and I'm going to use that latest version. So this is very common practice. It's the one I said don't do. Of course, I do it myself. So I'm going to look now at my configuration of what I've done. All I did is I added a simple set of shell scripts because this is a very basic way to get started with creating some of the pipeline. Here, all I had to do is extend my path, do a Docker info, build the Docker, you passing some variables back in from Jenkins. So now I've got my build number. And then I tag my latest build with the build number that's assigned as well as give it the latest. Then here, I'm using Carbon Black Cloud with our workload security to scan that image right here at the build time. Now, clearly, if I'm doing this through pipelines, I'll do it in stages. This is just super easy to show here. So that's what I did. Now, if I look at my build history, I can go ahead and show you the console output. And you can see that I pulled my Docker file from my GitHub repo, ran the info against to make sure that I had everything configured correctly. And then I went ahead and started doing the Docker build. This one isn't using my Jenkins file, and the next one will. But what I get back now are all the results of what was found in that vulnerability assessment of the freshly built Docker image. And then here, I can scan directly in, jump into Carbon Black Cloud. I see this exact container that I just built, and I see all of the risk factors against it. So I see first all the packages, which we generally will need for any kind of a security assessment. And I see the vulnerabilities. So I see all of my vulnerabilities, including the CVSS score. I can go directly into each of these, and I can see exactly what that means for me. But I also can see any affected images that also contain that same vulnerability and the level of risk that it presents. So if I have as many builds as I have here, you can tell that I've been building the same one. So I have a 3, 4, uh, several that are exact same. So it's either my Jenkins build or this simple Docker build that I just did based on Ubuntu. That's where I need to really focus some attention, because then I'll fix vulnerabilities across multiple affected images. If I had any running containers that had that vulnerability, I get that here. And if I've flagged any of these as exceptions, which I can do over here, so I can flag a vulnerability as an exception and just accept that risk. I do that sometimes for my low severity ones. So I'm focusing attention on the medium, high, and critical vulnerabilities. So within my inventory, part of what I'm seeing now are all of my image repos. So I can see everything that has gone on with every image repo that I have from Docker and Kubernetes. And I'll see everything that I have within each of these. I can also see my Kubernetes workloads as well as my Kubernetes images, because often I'll use a tool and try and convert my Docker file into Helm for Kubernetes. This makes life really good for me in one respect. It's hard because I have so much work to do, but here, as you can see, now I can see in a single view what are the criticals, highs, moderates, lows. And if I drill directly into this, I can see which workloads actually have this risk and then what to do about it. Very helpful, very simple, and I get that information instantly without running any sort of manual scans. With the hardening, I can go right in and see all my violations. And if I have any violations across any of my scope, I can go back and say, well, show me for the last month where my violations were. And I can go directly into any of my systems. For example, here I've got a My App, and it shows me, well, here's 4 policy violations. Well, that isn't good, is it? So let's go back into enforcement. Let's look at my Kubernetes policies, and I'm going to drill directly into my Kubernetes policies. I'm going to show you how I actually build these and extend them. So I can include my init containers, which is a good practice. I can define scope. Part of that scoping you can create is you can tag your containers and images for what phase they're in, so that your scope may be set to dev, could be set to test or prod, so that you are focusing on different types of policies at different stages. See, this is a surprisingly easy to use capability. Here we have container image policies. If I want to add a custom rule, I can select it here. You say, what is it I want to look at? Well, I can look at allowed registries. I can go ahead and prefix in a specific registry domain. This way, if I find something that has been pulled from a non-authorized registry, that will flag. An example of that is I might use Nexus, for example, as my local hub for all of my Docker images, and that's the only place I pull from. But if I saw a registry domain that wasn't from that assigned domain, that would create a flag in the system, and we'd know right away. Here, if I have vulnerabilities with fixes and I have anything that's critical, I can apply this to the template. Here, I've created a FISMA template, and I'll just create this. Now I've created a critical vulnerabilities rule, and I've created an alert against it. But if I had any images or containers that actually had this, and I wanted to block it, I can toggle this over and it would automatically block that image or container from running, which is, you know, a powerful capability and something that you definitely do want to think about, like how much more this could do for you. We could also do things like denying latest tags. Sometimes we want to ensure that only a specific measured and tested version of a container image is allowed to run. So this is a very commonly used thing that we do. So we can deny that latest tag. Here I can look for specific commands, exec to container, port forward, and here I just have these both set now, and now I just have them both alerting. That's all I had to do. And if I want to create exceptions, I can do that as well. I can confirm my policy by reviewing all the policies that I've just created and applied. And now I have this policy stack with 240 violations that I need to go through. So I can do that. You can see here, for example, writable file system. That violation exists in all of these workloads. These are all my Kubernetes images. So by exposing some of these, I can go down to this node, I can find out what's happening here, and now that's done. Policy is saved and it's now being enforced, or at least alerted for all of my container policies. And I can always see the health of all of my Kubernetes and Docker images running across my environment. So I can go and look at my risks, or I can start here with the overview. If I'm looking at things that, like this one that allows for privilege escalation, I can drill right into this. And now I see exactly which members of the cluster have that kind of a capability, which is a pretty serious security risk. I can configure this table. And I can say, all right, I don't need the resource kind and I don't need the resource name. So I'll just apply that and clean up the view a little bit. So now I know the namespace and the cluster. If I wanted to search, I can search by scope, do a search for any, and I'm going to look for anything where the has critical vulnerabilities. Unfortunately, this is not showing me anything in my Kubernetes clusters with critical vulnerabilities. It's true in some of my Docker images, however. Within my image repos, I can drill directly back into any of these. Go directly down, as we showed you before, we have all the vulnerability IDs associated. We'll be adding some more capabilities to this to make it even easier for you to use, such as helping you identify the specific vulnerability path within your containers and images. So make it easier for you to understand impact and to anticipate where the updates or the modification to address a security issue might create issues within your code that you'll need to address.
Hey, Bill, there was a couple questions that had popped into the Q&A while you're going through this. First one was, what differentiates VMware Carbon Black from other container and Kubernetes security products?
Oh, that's a great question. So a lot of the other companies you encounter in the space are companies like Twistlock, which was acquired by Palo Alto, Aqua Security, which is probably the largest of the standalone players, Sysdig, which is really awesome, and StackRox, which I think Red Hat just acquired recently. What we do see is a lot of these provide runtime monitoring, especially for container environments, but they're mostly not optimized to support Kubernetes workloads. That's part of what we focused on heavily when we brought in our acquisition was a company called Octarine, and we integrated that into our stack as a whole. As you may know, VMware is one of the larger players in the Kubernetes work, environment. So with our acquisition, we now have the entire Tanzu product group, which is Kubernetes, but we're also really focused on ensuring that we support everybody's Kubernetes implementation. So you could think that maybe I'm running everything on Tanzu myself, but I'm not. I'm actually using one of Red Hat's products, as well as Docker Hub on my Mac and Hyper-V on my Windows boxes to do all of my Docker and Kubernetes work. This ensures that we are maintaining a kind of a vociferously open approach to whoever's Docker Kubernetes technology that you're using. Uh, Part of what we look at is, we know a lot of folks just focus heavily on image scanning because that has been such a pressing issue, but we have moved this along into image scanning, automation, integration with CI/CD tool sets, and then the ability to create issues back into your Git repo. So you're tracking things in a far more automated way than we were in the past. This is going to help us an awful lot. And we've gotten this from customers that while it's becoming much more commoditized to do image scanning, in fact, you'll find some free things that do some very basic scans. They aren't terribly reliable, to be honest. Some of them provide, will tell you there's no vulnerabilities because their backend hasn't been updated. And that's kind of a risk to rely on products that aren't doing live update feeds from the engines that are out in the marketplace. We look just at some of the core requirements of a lot of customers, and part of the differentiation was the security of the Kubernetes orchestrator. That's what customers really wanted us to focus in on, and that's where we really have taken this, and where we will continue to expand our footprint, specifically in this space. So you can count on what we're doing to make it extremely easy for you to add um, these analysis capability, which is done today. It takes two command lines to add Carbon Black support to your Kubernetes or Docker environment. And so we can automate that pretty easily so that as you spin up new nodes, you've got that kind of security support right there that you need with a minimum level of effort to ensure accuracy and consistency across the board. Any other questions, Dan?
Yeah, appreciate that, Bill. One of them actually pretty relevant, especially for us here on the East Coast within the past week. The recent ransomware attack on Colonial Pipeline has led to a supply chain delay and impacted oil prices. Can you comment on that specific attack, and does Carbon Black protect against ransomware and other variants?
Your timing is perfect on that question because being here in the DC area, yes, we're already seeing the impact of the dark side ransomware, which is what is believed to be behind the Colonial Pipeline incident. We already have that out. So here at Carbon Black, we have our threat intelligence unit that builds a lot of the content that rolls directly into Carbon Black Cloud as well as to our on-premise products. You can tell here that we actually anticipated this. We'd already seen the dark side ransomware some time ago. So we have already pushed this out to all of our customers who are on Carbon Black Cloud, as well as on Carbon Black EDR and our App Control on-premise solutions. So we have the entire behavioral summary ready for you, as well as all the indicators of compromise. So we have, here's the shell bypass that's used. And we have the IOCs that you can apply to all of your other tools in addition to Carbon Black. So these queries will already be built into the system. And if you're on Carbon Black Cloud, you can go back to the dashboard, you can do investigate. You can look specifically for these kinds of incidents, and you will find that you will find anything like this. For example, fileless malware, which is real common. Let's go ahead and find everything last month. I'll change that to all times if I've got anything. So we're detecting this. And in addition to the behavior that we've seen from this malware itself, a common practice now is to look for and detect and respond to anything that is fileless, just the behavior of applications. So with Carbon Black Cloud, we automatically flag, detect, and display anything that is hit based on our integration with Microsoft's anti-malware scan interface, or AMSI. For our on-premise products, we also detect, and we will flag that as an AMSI incident, and it will appear in your SIM. So you'll have that kind of visibility there. So especially with Splunk and QRadar, you'll always have that information available to you. Grab this alert. So if I'd had something like this, we would have this specific incident here. And if I this investigation, bring that up. And we would also have this displayed within the on-screen display. We rebuild that process chain. You'd know exactly what had happened in terms of anything like this occurring. And we would also give you far more detail down below in the screen, telling you step by step time, process, anything happened in memory, anything touching kernel, process, network, and disk. So your investigation is far easier because you'd see exactly what did what, when, and what fashion. And you'd also have the ability to go backwards in time. So you can drill backwards and forwards because the Carbon Black Cloud, as well as our on-premise products, are recording these information 24 by 7 by 365. Some products only start recording when you start the investigation, but with Carbon Black products, we are always monitoring and we're always there for you to take immediate actions, such as automatically banning a process you've seen. So if we had any processes that were associated with DarkSide ransomware, one, they would automatically be blocked. And with our Carbon Black on-premise products like App Control, we already have a rapid configuration in the box that if it's enabled for a ransomware malware detection, it already detects this and will stop it. So I strongly encourage you, if you have access to our user exchange, please take a look, read what we've put up here about this specific dark side and ransomware information, and please do apply the guidance for Carbon Black Cloud that's already been enabled for you. Anything else, Dan?
Excellent overview. That's it from the Q&A, but really appreciate the overview and the webinar, Bill. A lot of great information. I don't know if you wanted to take a few minutes to just wrap it up and summarize anything and have a conclusion.
Well, in terms of a conclusion, I'm going to encourage everybody to shift left as rapidly as possible, get back into your source code repositories and start analyzing those. Start out with secrets. Uh, I will bring it up again, but if you're on GitHub, apply Git Guardian to your repos. Look for any secrets or exposed content that can place your source code and resulting applications at risk of attack. We want to reduce that attack surface area that you may have. Then proceed forward with locking down your repositories and remove, honestly, any private repos that are pushing into your repos. We need to apply better security and we need to apply better repo hygiene for everything that we're doing. Uh, Construct your CI/CD tool chain so that you're automatically building based on a trigger and then automatically scanning the resulting application or image as soon as it's built so we can identify the risk factors that we're presenting. Together with Carbon Black, with you, we can reduce the potential for these attacks, the introduction of unauthorized code, or the reliance on potentially unreliable binary, source, or modules that are used in our applications. And we look forward to working with you. We're always open to talking with you and helping you figure out any challenges that you're running into. Some of the best experts in cybersecurity available at Carbon Black through our threat intelligence unit up here in Waltham, Massachusetts. So we look forward to talking with you and thank you for being with us today.
Great. Thanks so much, Bill and Dan. I really appreciate it. If anybody has any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to those email aliases that were up on the screen at the beginning of the demo. You can always reach out to myself. That's megan.moore@sterling.com. And we look forward to seeing you on next Wednesday's Power Block session. Have a great day.